say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy.
You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night.
Couch potatoes unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! ! Which is based on a blog of the same name. Even if our panel of United Couch Potatoes tried martinis and uppers just to get rid of other bad tastes in their mouths. Uh-oh, foreshadowing and dirty jokes aside. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU, ! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays. And as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, via Google Play, and now on Spotify to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including but not limited to The Crown, Once Upon a Time, a series of unfortunate events, Fuller House, Westworld, American Horror Story, The Good Place, Grace and Frankie, Supernatural, Arrested Development, and Jane the Virgin. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, Gotham, Schitt's Creek, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, iZombie, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Orange is the New Black, 13 Reasons Why, the Marvel's Defenders panel will talk Season 2 of The Punisher, the DCTU series will talk Season 4 of DC's Legends of Tomorrow, and the Star Trek 50 Plus series will cover the animated series. We'll be launching new panels covering The Americans, Riverdale, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Altered Carbon, Mr. Robot, Charmed, Outlander, and the Breaking Bad universe. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll take a smallish look back at a short-term show from some kind of yesteryear, namely Freaks and Geeks. We'll don witch hats and bring our Salem cats for Sabrina the Teenage Witch. We'll put out some musical stops for our crazy ex-girlfriend, and we'll revisit one of the all-time and most watched classic sitcoms, MASH. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers and comedy shows and Comic-Cons, and we just went live from Blue Bridge Games to take a shiny look back at Firefly. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff. It's true. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel via Google Play, and now via Spotify. In the meantime, if you don't hear your show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback, even if it includes aquatic predators that might occasionally look fake in certain contexts. That's a film reference, that is. Today, we return to an interview feature on CPU! That we introduced last year. Our humble little podcast from Grand Rapids, Michigan has been going for 4 years, and as always, we will be covering many more shows and introducing many more panels as time progresses. Yet, as probability might allow, there are also going to be times when we stop ongoing coverage of a show, mainly because not only are no new panelists interested in it anymore, but even the panelists who have been talking about it on this humble little podcast have lost interest too, for whatever reason. Has the show declined in quality? Has the story gone off the deep end? Has something happened that is so offensive to our intrepid viewer they cannot bring themselves to keep watching? A combination of several or all of these? Or is there a creative or unanticipated reason why our panelists do not want to keep going? You might have heard the phrase when referring to people who stop watching shows for some cataclysmic reason or over some keystone event, jumping the shark. Jumping the shark refers to when a TV show or something that was once popular no longer warrants the attention it has previously received, particularly when attempts at publicity only serve to highlight its irrelevance. The idiom jumping the shark is pejorative, most commonly used in reference to unsuccessful gimmicks for promoting something. It is similar to past its peak, but more specifically suggests an unwillingness to acknowledge the failing. Originally, the phrase was used to describe an episode of a television comedy with a gimmick or unlikely occurrence moments desperately attempting to keep viewers' interest. Moments labeled as jumping the shark are considered indications that writers have exhausted their focus, that the show has strayed irretrievably from an older and better formula, or that the series as a whole is declining in quality. Popularized by radio personality John Hine in the 1990s and early 2000s, the phrase derives from a scene in a fifth season episode of the sitcom Happy Days in which the character Fonzie jumps over a shark while on water skis. This was deemed a ratings ploy, for it was outside the original thrust of the sitcom. Well, today we continue our Shark Jumpers Anonymous feature, wherein even though a show might have life left in it because of network renewal, our podcast panel simply does not have the interest to keep talking about it anymore. This series is an interview-style feature where panelists must answer pre-written questions to explain why they have stopped watching the show at hand, or why they haven't yet, if applicable. If there are any panelists left standing at the end of the interviews, they will have the opportunity to return to CPU a final time once the show has officially ended, to reevaluate their decision to keep watching, and to justify whether or not doing so was really worth it in the end. Our third show on the chopping block for today's episode, Will and Grace. CPU last covered this revived sitcom following season 9 in August 2018. On this panel, the constituent members, namely Jeremy and Emily, a third panelist departed the panel for Life's Greater Journeys, recorded 2 prior episodes about this show in summer 2018. In fact, for a detailed plot summary of the show in our episodes, which first look back at the original 8-season run of the must-see TV sitcom and covered the first revival season, the 9th, listen to those prior episodes via our feeds or our website. As your chief CP and main moderator assessed interest in Season 10, the second of the revival seasons, our panel got together one last time to record our third group of Shark Jumpers Anonymous interviews. Who's still watching? Who made like the Fonz and jumped the shark? Well, keep listening.
Hi, my name's Jeremy, and I jumped the shark on watching Will and Grace.
I'm Emily, and I jumped the shark on Will and Grace.
Hello. My name is Kylie, and I did not jump the shark watching Will and Grace. Explain how you came to watch the show. Remind the listener how you started and what kept you watching.
Oh, God.
You don't have to say the exact words from before.
Right. Now, are you talking just the new version or in general?
However you want to answer it.
Okay, so I started watching the original Will and Grace, 15 years ago or something like that. Really, a long time ago. I don't remember how I got into it. But
actually, it's 21.
Is it 21?
Yeah, it started in 1998, so it would be 21 years ago.
Yeah, so I started watching right away, and then I watched every episode. It was on twice a day at one point, once at like 3 and once at 10 or something. So I was watching them, and they played consistent seasons, like they'd play episode 1, episode 2, and then the other set was in a different time slot, different part of the season, and I would watch both of them every day. And just continue watching just because it was completely hilarious, and I love the dynamics between a couple of the characters. The newer one, I really wanted to reconnect with that old style, the way I felt watching the original Will and Grace.
Ooh, what did I say before?
Well, it doesn't have to be exact.
Let me consult my notes.
Okay.
I started watching Will and Grace when it was originally airing in the 90s, early 2000s. My mom watched it all the time, and so I would, want to spend time with her, and I guess we were watching Will and Grace. And then I eventually kind of fell in love with it and watched the whole series a few times. And then when they came out with the new series or the next seasons recently, I thought, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to watch this. So that's how I came to watch the show.
Will and Grace is one of my all-time favorite shows, one of my all-time favorite sitcoms. I started watching the show basically because I was already watching must-see TV at the time, which would have been 1998. Friends was a big deal. There were a couple other ones. Seinfeld had gone off the air, and NBC was looking for a replacement. And at that time, there wasn't so many things to choose from. You basically had your basic major networks and cable. You didn't have all these other options like you do in 2019. You had to pick what you wanted to watch or change the channel via, remote with a lot of surfing. And so oftentimes I just kept it on, and I started watching Will and Grace, and I was absolutely blown away by it because Will and Grace at the time, and there's going to be a lot of talk, we've already talked about it in our previous episodes, there's been a lot of talk about context. In 1998, there really were no shows that prominently featured gay characters in a positive light. In fact, it was just 2 years prior to 1998, in 1996, when phenomenal talk show host Ellen DeGeneres got fired from her own sitcom for coming out on TV and for sinking the ratings because she announced to the world that she was a lesbian. So the 90s were not, they were more progressive than the 80s and the 70s, but they were not as progressive as, say, the other decades that we now live in, the aughties and the 20 teens. So to watch a show featuring two prominent gay characters and other gay characters and sort of the culture around it, even if it was played for stereotypes at times, was just downright never done. And it was completely progressive at the time. And I have kind of an open mind, sort of everybody's people's people kind of viewpoint. And I just loved it. And they were funny. All four of these actors, Eric McCormick, Deborah Messing, Sean Hayes, Megan Mullally, are great together. They have awesome chemistry. The original run of 8 seasons was very fun to watch. And the further it went along, the funnier it got. Especially after, I would say, the first half of season 1, it really hit its stride. And then until the producers left the show sometime around season 6, it kept that stride and only got funnier and funnier. So I watched most of the 8 seasons in real time. There was some time during the original run when I stopped watching regularly, but still checked in on it. But it's still one of my all-time favorite shows. And of course, since then, thanks to streaming, I've been able to watch all of it. So talk about what you liked about the show at first.
At first, I loved that it was a different type of story being told. Yeah, we have a ton of TV shows about a group of friends living in New York, but having an LGBT perspective was something that I had never seen before and something I never had in my life. And seeing that it was on TV and that it was okay and that, to sound kind of archaic, they're just like everyone else, and that my mom was okay with it. It kind of really shaped my perspective with not accepting that, but how I reacted to the LGBT community. And it was kind of formative now that I look back on it. But I really thought it was funny. I thought it was smart and clever. I thought Deborah Messing's hair was beautiful. I thought Karen was hilarious. So I wanted to keep watching.
With the original, like I said, the character dynamic between them was awesome. It's probably the best dynamic I've seen in almost any TV show. With the second, or the re-release, I would say, call it, I wanted to revisit that. I think they kind of fell short of that, though. It felt more forced. And I liked all the little side characters, the cameo appearances by all the different actors and actresses that would come on the show were freaking hilarious. The reoccurring characters, like the Molly Shannon one, Cher, that was good. They told a really good story, too, and I feel like they were just serious enough when they needed to be, and they were funny the rest of the time.
I think I've kind of already covered that. It's extremely funny, and the characters are so funny, and they work so well together, and there are running jokes, inside jokes, and other jokes that they make callbacks to episodes and seasons down the line, and there's a very rich set of relationships between the four characters, and once you buy into their dynamic, that Will and Grace are completely codependent, that Jack is basically a man-child who just is thrown caution to the wind and is loving life while being paid for by his closest friends, and that Karen is an offensive, kind of totally rich, totally out of touch, but not totally out of touch because she's drunk and high most of the time. Once you accept those dynamics and you kind of see how they all fit together in the puzzle, it's really hard not to watch. They're hilarious. They're still hilarious. I love them. That's why I watched the show at first, or what I liked about the show at first. Did you grow to love it at any point? When and how long did that last? Yes, I grew to love it. I think I grew to love it in early seasons. I think I grew to love it pretty quickly, in fact. I probably didn't love it right away, but I know that I loved it sometime, probably around season 2, and kept loving it until probably around season 6. At season 6, when the original creators left the show because they had various disputes with the network, which was NBC, the writing and the showrunners, the main writers and the showrunners changed, and that did produce a noticeable difference on the show. And there were things that happened and choices that were made that didn't quite make sense. So for that, I would say that I probably loved the show for 4 seasons, and that seasons 2 through 6 would be the peak of the show's history, but it's still funny throughout.
I wouldn't say that I loved it, but I really liked it. I was definitely along for the ride. I cared about the characters, especially kind of toward the end of the first series. You've been on this ride with these characters for so long, and you're invested, and that's kind of where I was at.
And I'm going to keep saying, with the original show, I grew to love that almost immediately and still love it. I will still rewatch episodes all the time. I have favorite episodes. I can quote half of them. I did not grow to love the new one, though. I grew to enjoy it, and then it got to be a little too, I don't know, it almost felt like it was a slap in the face of the old one, if that makes sense.
So when for you did it take a turn for the worst, and what didn't you like specifically?
I would say it took a turn for the worst about near the end of the first return season. So, like, I guess the new series, if we want to call it that. What is that, like season 5 or 6?
Season
the
9.
New one?
Do you mean the first revival season?
Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, season 9? Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so season 9. Clearly I'm not a devoted fan. So near the end of season 9, apparently, I just thought it got a little too campy, and it didn't have the same heart that the original series did, and it seemed kind of clunky how they would throw in kind of almost a movie of the week type of message into some of the episodes just so that they could make a statement, which I appreciated, but I thought it was a little ham-fisted, I guess. It was wonderful and refreshing to have these characters back, but I kind of realized we didn't need them to keep telling their story, I guess. But Deborah Messing did not find Grace until apparently much later. I had given up. I haven't seen any of the season 10. And that's not because, like, I didn't enjoy the show. It just kind of became a chore to, I guess I got to watch this. And that's not fun. That's when you stop watching.
I think it took a turn for the worse in almost the first episode. I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. I immediately thought the first episode was very forced. It felt like they had forgotten how to be Will and Grace, not so much Jack and Karen. So I kept trying to watch it, and I thought, oh, they're just rusty. It's been 10 years, and it just didn't get any better, I don't think. And I felt like it was more of a exercise in politics than anything else for a lot of the different storylines they had in the new season.
So since you jumped the shark, what finally made you decide to jump the shark? What was the last straw?
Honestly, the last straw didn't have anything to do with the show. It was more, I'm too busy. If the show was a little better or hooked me a little bit more, I would probably make time for it, but I couldn't reconcile making time when I didn't have that much anymore.
You know, when you're trying to watch multiple shows at once, I know you can relate to this.
Sure.
You just start prioritizing, like, okay, I'm going to actually keep up with this show. And it started to grow and fall further down the list of things I needed to catch up on. And next thing you know, I'm a season behind. And it was just, I guess I'm just not into it anymore. Like, I don't care what happens to them. It's campy and it's silly and it's a little too much now. And yeah, I love those characters, but I can remember them in the first 8 seasons. I jumped the shark around then.
What would you say to the show's creators in light of your change of opinion?
Well, now I feel like a big jerk because apparently it's kind of found its stride and I gave up on it too soon. So,
well, that is just my opinion, but to be fair.
I would say I'm sorry. I'm sure I'll come back to it soon. 2 years from now, I'll be like, nothing to watch on Hulu. Oh, wait, I'll finish watching Will and Grace. That'll be great. And then I'll get sucked in again, I'm sure. But I don't think it was really, when you revive a show like that, it does take a while to find the rhythm and find that magic in those characters and implant them into today's world, I guess. So I just kind of lost patience with letting them find it. And I'm sorry for that. I'll definitely come back to it at some point. I just don't have the time to keep up with it right now.
I would say sometimes some things are better off dead.
Oh.
Like the tagline for Pet Sematary. I think they went out with a bang and they should have left it at that.
So what did you hope or expect would happen instead?
I honestly kind of expected to feel the way I feel now. but I was cautiously optimistic that it would rekindle what I had found in the first set of seasons.
I just had hoped it would have picked up right when it left off and everything, not time-wise, but I mean, I wished, when you play a character that long, I would have thought that you can jump into it easier. You don't need a whole season to find your bearings. They did in some cases, and I don't know, I thought Will and Grace was always one of those fun shows. I mean, it's a comedy, obviously, but it got a little preachy. They really pushed their political agenda, which aligns with mine, so it's not like I disagreed with it, but it was a little much. And I hear about politics in the news 24/7. I want 30 or 45 minutes to just laugh and escape and live with these people in their lives and not be reminded of the crap that's going on in mine, politically, I guess. But I forgot the question.
What were you hoping? What were you hoping or expecting? What happened instead?
I went on a tangent. What was I hoping for? Yeah, I just hoped that, the storyline would continue on. I wanted to see how they would get out of that. They kind of brushed past it in the beginning of the 9th season, which I didn't quite appreciate. Like, they made like it never happened. And that was very St. Elsewhere of them, and I didn't appreciate it. But, I mean, I would like to give it another chance down the road. Not right now. I don't care enough, I guess. But because I do appreciate the characters, I appreciate the world that's been created and what it did for television. I just think it, I don't know, like a little embarrassing sometimes. Like, oh, you should just stop. But apparently it's gotten better, and I can't wait to watch that and feel very differently.
I don't want to build your hopes up or anything.
Right.
I mean, just
I'll call you in several months and be like, you said.
I know, don't do that. If this panel could continue, would you continue with it? Why or why not? I absolutely would continue with the panel. In fact, I tried to convince the two that jumped the shark that season 10 is much better than season 9, which it is. I've watched all of it. The problems they were having in season 9, which included Deborah Messing's struggle to kind of find the Grace character again, the overly politicized tenor of the season, because if you recall, gentle listener, season 9 came about because the 4 cast members did a political short prior to the 2016 election that got so many views and hits and things from wherever it was posted, it convinced the network to kind of jump on this revival trend and revive Will and Grace. So we watched it, and I didn't hate season 9 as much as my co-panelists did. I do agree that season 9 was a rocky season. It had to do a lot to kind of overcome, for example, the series finale of the original run and some of the events leading up to the season finale of the original run. But there was still all of this core, sort of the heart and soul of the show was still there. The backbone was still there. The original creators came back to work on season 9. Their writing and their humor was still there. It was still funny to me. Maybe not as funny to my co-panelists, but still funny to me. So I looked forward to season 10. And then I watched season 10, and it was better. Deborah Messing was much more in the groove of her character. They abandoned the political stuff. Not completely. I mean, Karen's still Karen, but most of that was gone. They sort of made some political allegory with Grace's run for president of the Interior Designer Club, Alliance Network, whatever it's called. I can't even remember at this point, and I just watched the season. She runs for president of this network, and that's clearly an allegory for current socio-political times, but they didn't hit you over the head with it, and that was refreshing. And the 4 were just really back to where they were, but with their changed circumstances, where Will is kind of trying to explore, sort of late-stage relationships. Grace meets David Schwimmer. David Schwimmer is a recurring guest star on this season of Will and Grace. He plays Noah, a curmudgeonly social media star who gets his name by criticizing everything in New York City, although he's secretly a romance novel writer. And even though David Schwimmer still, in whatever he is, appears and sounds and looks and is basically playing Ross all over again, because honestly, I don't think Ross is incredibly far off from David Schwimmer, although I think David Schwimmer's probably a nicer guy. Noah was a lot like Ross from Friends, and there was even a couple of in-jokes and things, Easter egg jokes that referred to Friends, which I appreciated. And they cast him to be a love interest for Grace. And they actually had some pretty good chemistry. Not as good a chemistry as him and Jennifer Aniston, let's be fair. But it was a very good stunt cast. It elevated the season. Matt Bomer was a recurring guest star. He played Will's significant other. And I can't remember his name, but he played kind of a newscaster who had, obviously very wonderful looks, because Matt Bomer is a hot kind of guy, and very popular amongst the ladies and the men, and kind of obsessed with his own looks, but also kind of, I guess he had a relationship history based around his looks and was very interested in being with Will because he could have something real and Will could understand him, and that provided a funny dynamic. Jack is getting ready to get married to Estefan, and whatever his name is in real life, my gosh, you are doing such a wonderful job. He's really funny and adds so much to the show and really makes Jack's more grating characteristics, although he's funny and he's one of my favorites. He does have grating characteristics, but I think Estefan softens those, and it's really sweet. And then, of course, Karen is Karen, and Megan Mullally is a national treasure, and everything is funny. And so I really wanted to come back and talk about season 10. But the other two, as they say, were so unwilling to watch it because they were season 9 left such a poor taste in their mouth, and they just don't prioritize this TV show in a seascape of literally hundreds of choices across all kinds of media. I mean, I can't blame them necessarily, but I do think Will and Grace still has some chutzpah left, and I look forward to watching it. It's still funny. I still laugh at it, and I really wanted to talk about it. Why do you think people want to jump the shark other than busy lives? Well, honestly, if I'm being fair, I can see Jeremy and Emily's point. Will and Grace had its time. Its time was the late 90s, early aughties, and the kind of humor on which it relies, I don't think anybody younger than Generation X probably appreciates, because in this world of woke culture where everything has to be acknowledged as, people are people, there seems to be a real struggle amongst millennials and Gen Z over things that came out back then, that unfortunately that was the way the world was. And it's not anymore, and you can choose to appreciate that context or not, as long as you're not taking that humor to heart. I have very mixed feelings about it. I mean, if you didn't know from listening to prior episodes, my life outside this podcast is to work in civil rights, and so I get it. But I also believe very strongly that society has to figure out how to laugh at itself again. And I don't know how that's going to happen. I'm not talking about PC culture. I'm not talking about being offensive. There has to be a happy medium somewhere where we can take honest and fun pokes at ourselves without it turning into a massive war, whether it's online or at rallies or anywhere else. I mean, this is kind of where the world has gone, and that's not a political statement. It's just a fact. And I think Will and Grace and its writers were hip enough to that they adapted to it, but I don't think everybody's going to see it that way. I think those of us who are older and have kind of lived through all these time periods and have seen the evolution, recognize the evolution in Will and Grace, but I get it if it doesn't land, because it's not the humor of now. And that probably is the most telling thing. It's not going to attract younger viewers. I don't think, now maybe I'm wrong, and if you're a younger viewer, tweet at us at CPU Podcast, gram us at Couch Potatoes Unite, Facebook us. I just don't think younger viewers are going to appreciate Will and Grace as much as I do. Now, that's not to say that Jeremy and Emily are much younger than me, because they're not. Emily's the youngest of the three of us, and Jeremy is in the middle, and I know that they both loved the original run of the show. So I think for them, it really just comes down to the show had its moment, and maybe there's something to that too. But I think that the writers and the actors have capitalized on this moment. They're not going to sort of drive it into the ground. They've announced that season 11 will be the last, and there are all kinds of factors that could be contributing to that, including this alleged feud between Deborah and Megan. And gosh, I hope that's been thoroughly blown out of proportion, because that would be sad. But, you know, there could be any number of reasons for that. But the fact that they're calling it quits after season 11, I think is smart. And so for anybody who jumped the shark, I really think that people should reconsider and just come back to the show. There's just a couple more seasons left. It's funny. It's nostalgic. It kind of gets you into a place where you can laugh about the state of the world again. And that's about the highest praise I can give any show right now. Do you think the shark jumpers are making a mistake? Why? If no, why do you forgive them? I think they're making a little bit of a mistake. I think Jeremy and Emily will regret it if they don't return to the show. And I know that Jeremy's husband watches the show. And I think Emily said that she would probably watch the show at some point. I think they will regret it if they don't give it another honest-to-goodness try and watch seasons 10 and 11. You know, the show is funny. It found its stride again. Maybe it's not as funny as seasons 1 through 6 or 1 through 5, but it's still funny, like I said before. It makes you laugh. It's comforting. It's nostalgic. But I still forgive them. I don't hold any grudges. If you have other shows you want to watch, great. Just tell me and we'll talk about them on the podcast. So we've kind of covered this in previous episodes, but I'm rephrasing the question slightly. Given where you are now, would you watch anything else by these creators? And you can ignore their past stuff if you want, and ignoring Will and Grace. If they created anything else, would you watch that, or did this show ruin your ability to appreciate other TV under the same creative umbrella?
Oh, no, I would definitely watch anything else they put out. It would probably be I would take it with a grain of salt, but I think they did such a great job with the original series that I would definitely jump on the bandwagon for anything else they did and at least give it a try.
I would definitely watch whatever they had. Like, if it was billed as from the creators of Will and Grace, I would be like, oh, that's going to be smart and witty, and they're going to be characters that I probably really love. You know, it's like Joss Whedon. Sure, there's been some clunkers, but I'm willing to follow his storytelling anywhere. You know, I'll give anything a chance. So I think I would be intrigued by that. As I recall, when we talked about it last time, there weren't very many big hits from them.
No, their past projects were mainly canceled. Except for this one.
But, you know, if there's smoke, there's fire. So if they're doing a good job with one thing, who's to say they can't do it again?
I am definitely going to finish the show. I'm going to keep watching. You'll probably hear my final thoughts sometime after season 11 bows. I would watch something else by these creators, depending upon the premise. I think they're smart, but I also think they write what they know. And so it would really depend on the premise and if I believe that they know what they're talking about. But no, this show has not ruined my ability to appreciate other TV by this creative umbrella. I think Will and Grace is still one of the smartest shows that's ever been released. It may have some stereotypical humor. You may or may not like that. But there's so much more about it that isn't stereotypical, that is really funny, smart, great comedic timing, great performances, great guest stars. It's just a lot of fun, and I would take fun over a lot of other things nowadays on TV. Will you watch the cast members in other projects? So they have had some other projects in the past. I don't know that we've talked about this much. But if, say, Eric McCormick, Deborah Messing, Megan Mullally, Sean Hayes went on to other things, would you watch them?
Yes. Except for Deborah Messing.
Oh.
And no shade. She's a lovely woman. Fine actress. But she has been in a couple shows that I've had no interest in watching. So, I mean, obviously that answers that question. But I really enjoy Eric McCormack. He went in to do a couple other things. What was that show where he was like a professor, but also like psychic or something? I don't know. I forget the name of that show, but I really enjoyed it. And then obviously anything Megan Mullally does, I will watch because it's genius. And Sean Hayes, of course, whether it's stage or screen.
I will, and I have. I've watched Deborah Messing in Smash. Maybe not because she was in it, but I would. I want to watch Travelers, which Eric McCormick is in. And I've watched, I think, Sean Saves the World just because Sean Hayes was in it. It didn't last very long. But I watched it, and I would watch anything that Megan Mullally puts her stamp on because I think that woman is wonderful. So yes, I would. I probably would be the type who says, oh, Deborah or Eric or Sean or Megan are in this project. I might want to check it out. Maybe with someone else attached, maybe not. It will depend on the project, but by and large, I probably would watch anything that they put their stamp on or get cast in?
I would and have. I am commonly the person that goes, oh my God, that's Megan Mullally from Will and Grace, or Deborah Messing, because that's iconically what I think of when I see those four actors.
So what have you watched?
Oh God, what did I just watch? Oh, Megan Mullally was actually in Where Did You Go, Bernadette just recently. I actually didn't recognize her when I first saw her, though. So I watched that. Sean Hayes, I don't remember the last thing I've seen him in, honestly. I think I remember feeling that he did a good job with whatever it was. Eric McCormick, I watched some show that I watched 3 episodes of and immediately turned it off. It was some show about they were people from the future coming back to the past.
Travelers?
Yes, did not care for it. I love Eric McCormick. Like, he was one of my first crushes. But he was great, but the show just did not do anything for me.
How about Deborah?
Deborah, I've seen in a few things here and there. Nothing really comes to mind, but again, she's always fun to see in something. You can't mistake the fiery redhead.
So, do you watch similar shows such as what, and what would you recommend instead? Or if not, would you still stick with this genre? And I realize that this is a sitcom, but you can narrow it down to sitcom with queer characters or any way you want to characterize it.
Well, I definitely still watch like Modern Family, which I think is really funny, even though it's a little played out. I don't watch a lot of sitcoms anymore, honestly. I watch a lot more drama stuff. Years and Years, I would recommend. That's along the same lines. It's more serious. It's a British show. The moderator would definitely love it. But yeah, sitcoms are not really my bag anymore.
So you'd recommend Years and Years instead?
Years and Years, or continue watching Modern Family.
I kind of pigeonhole it as like one of those shows that's about a group of friends living in the big city. So like How I Met Your Mother really filled that niche for me. And it was kind of more, I don't want to say more my generation, because it was really only like 5 or 7 years later. But for me, it hit my life at a sweet spot where I really started to understand and better related. And it was similar storytelling where they still had some moments of just real heart and heartbreak, but also did not shy away from hilarity and silliness, which I really appreciate. It was a good 30-minute escape, which is what I go to that genre looking for. So that's what I would recommend. And I watch that over and over again, like Friends.
You've watched Will and Grace for 9 seasons, 9 of the 10 available. What would you say are the top 3 pros and the bottom 3 cons of watching Will and Grace, with everything taken into account?
Of all the seasons?
Yep.
New and old?
Yeah. That probably will help you frame your overall top 3s.
I think the cons, some of the writing can be kind of fast and loose, especially when it comes to like Karen's husband, Stanley Walker. I think they made a couple poor choices with some characters that could have developed a lot better than they did. And there was one particular casting choice that I thought was a very bad choice. I didn't like Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh.
The pros, I think I've said this before, but the dynamic, the comedy is really spot on. It's rewatchable. It's very rewatchable. And I think I've only got 2 pros, even though I like it so much.
So for you, it's
the original.
The ensemble chemistry, and it's rewatchable as the pros. And then you didn't like a casting choice in Rosie O'Donnell. You think the writing is uneven. And then you mentioned some poor character choices. What are you referring to?
I feel like anytime they needed something to pull out of their bag to snag some more people to watch or something to come up with for the next week's episode, they just tried to do something really weird with Stanley Walker's character. They would have like embezzlement going on or all kinds of just crazy stuff. Shenanigans ensued.
Okay.
That were a little unbelievable.
So Stanley Walker as a general device kind of went too far for you.
Correct. Especially like the identity theft going on, the FBI getting involved with Malcolm. It was a little much. When everyone else was so centered and grounded.
Oh boy. Okay. So.
This is the most thought-provoking question.
These are the hard-hitting questions, guys. Man.
I know.
Okay.
What can I say?
Some real journalism here. So I would say the top 3 pros, if I were to recommend this show to somebody, is it's brilliant writing. It's smart, it's funny, and it's carried off by brilliant performers. The timing, the chemistry, it's unparalleled for a TV show of that time. Like, it was really just magic. It was. You really fall in love with the characters because they're relatable. They're flawed people, and it's sometimes just awful. But we can see that in all of us because not everybody walks around perfect. And they really did not shy away from that, which was nice. And it was a different perspective. Like, you never got to see what it was like to live as a gay man in New York City who's trying to just live his life in the 90s. Like, that wasn't on TV. And that he also had a gay best friend, like, that wasn't on TV. So unless you had like HBO or something, but that was my first kind of window into, quote, that world. So it was a cool formative experience for me, and I really appreciate that, and I'll always remember that. Okay, top 3 cons.
Okay.
Here we go. It got a little tedious, storylines at times. I don't know whether it was like the writers didn't know what to do next, or they didn't think they'd get that far, or what, but it was definitely a few seasons, especially toward the end of the like seasons, I guess 7 and 8, you could kind of sense it was circling the toilet, like they were almost done, and it was kind of wrapping up so slowly. I don't have too many cons. I mean, that was a really big one because I don't want to feel like I'm wasting my time watching a TV show. Coming from the person who will binge a TV show I've seen 11 times, but, another con. I felt the first revival season was a little too silly, too much, too
over the top
caricature-y. Oh, yeah, exactly, of what it was, and it just seemed not the same, and that's why I wanted to keep watching, because I enjoyed what had been produced previously. I really liked that moment, that creative moment, and it didn't have the same energy. It felt kind of slapsticky at times, and that's not really what it was. It had those moments, of course, but it was just, they were forcing it, and I didn't vibe with it. So I think those are my 2 big cons, and I guess the kind of over-politicized storylines at times. But
so to sum up, pros are writing, characters / performances, and originality. And cons are tediousness, particularly with the original run, over-the-top revival, and the politics.
Yes, you summed it up so concisely. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's what I'm here for. Top 3 pros and top 3 cons of watching the show. Okay, this is easy for me. Top 3 pros: writing, acting, directing. Will and Grace has it all. James Burrows is the primary episode director for this show. James Burrows is a TV legend. He's done a hecaton of sitcoms, very well-known ones that you've all heard of. Friends comes to mind. There are others. Nothing else is coming to mind. Will and Grace is one of his signature projects. He is a genius. It shows every time. The writing is smart, it's effective, it's witty. And I've already mentioned the performances. If you can't, that's the holy trinity in TV, so if that doesn't convince you, I'm sorry. The top 3 cons. Season 9 is rough. Season 7 and 8 are rough. Season 7, 8, and 9 are rough. The show, there's no TV show is perfect from end to end, especially for one that's gone on as long as Will and Grace has. So there are weak seasons. That's number 1 con. Number 2 con is, especially in the original run, and more so in the original run than in the revival run, Will and Grace probably relies too much on guest stars. They get a lot of stunt casts, but I also think that means that a lot of people want to be on the show, so I don't think that's like a totally big con. But especially in the original run, it kind of got a little tedious because when the writing suffered, guest stars became the crutch. But I don't think that's true of season 9 or 10. And then the third con, there are some clunkier moments. Not really in season 10, though. I guess what I would say is the humor is a little dated, especially in the original run. I think they've updated it for the now. They certainly talk about how things have evolved. I think they're self-aware, so I don't think this is a big con either. But the humor is you're either going to laugh at it or you're not. You're either going to appreciate the fact that there are gay people on the show or you're not. I do, and I generally like the humor, but there are some jokes that don't land. There are some times when I scratch my head. Usually it's a Grace moment for me because I tend to find Jack and Karen exponentially funnier than I find Will and Grace. I tend to find Will and Grace funnier together than they are separately, and I tend to find Will funnier than Grace if they're alone. So for me, Grace is, because she has to rely more on her physical comedy, I think that's where the Grace character really shines. Like the joke when Grace starts to sing, that's really old even now. I just don't think that's funny, at least when they repeat it or keep it going for 5 minutes. So maybe don't do that so much anymore. It's a nice little callback, but just don't drive it into the ground. So that's what I'd say the 3 cons are. It's a little clunky at times. There are weaker seasons. I don't even remember what the 3rd con was because I'm not convinced these are totally cons. I'm just making them up. Would you recommend this show? Of course I would. I would recommend this show. I didn't jump the shark. I still think it's funny. I would recommend it to people who checked out the original run and haven't checked out the revival run. I would recommend it to people who generally like TV with gay characters. I would generally recommend this show to people who like funny things. Will and Grace is funny. It's still funny. Watch it. It's only 3 additional seasons, or watch the original run. Frankly, I don't care what you watch. You should just watch some of it because it's funny. And if you don't laugh at it, well, you're not funny. I'm sorry, you're just not. Just kidding. Maybe it's not your humor, but I would recommend the show. To most people, there are going to be people I don't recommend the show to. That's just real life, but I would recommend the show. Would you recommend this show even if you jump the shark? Why? Or would you maybe recommend this show, or in part, and which parts? Or would you not recommend this show, and why not?
So I would definitely recommend the first 9 episodes or seasons.
8 seasons?
Because those were 8 seasons, yes.
Yeah.
Because those were so great. I would not recommend the new season at all, the 9th one or beyond. Just because, like I said, I think it kind of ruined what I felt about the first 8 seasons a little bit. And I'll never get back that innocence. What was the other part of the question?
I think you answered the maybe or in part. So you're saying you would recommend the original series, but not recommend the revival series.
Correct. It was fun just to kind of look back on them for a second, but if it was 1 episode, it would have been fun.
So you're thinking a reunion special would have been the way to go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like even a 1 or 2 hour reunion. Yeah, that would have been great.
Yes, even though I jumped the shark. I like I said earlier, I do want to circle back to it when my heart is open to it, I guess. Sure. But right now I'm not really into it, and that changes. Sometimes you don't want to watch a show in the original run, but then 10 years later you rediscover it and you're like, wow, why didn't I watch it? This is amazing. It just hits you at a different point in life, and wasn't my point, I guess. So yes, I would definitely recommend it for the 3 reasons I stated previously, even though it does have its issues. Every TV show does, and it's absolutely up to the audience to make that determination of whether or not it's for them, I guess. But I would recommend it, yeah. Especially starting with the first series.
Sure, from the original starting point.
Absolutely.
If interest is expressed in reviving this panel, would I be willing to return? Well, since I'm the producer of this podcast, yes! Since I moderate this panel, yes. So yeah, if you want to talk about Will and Grace, email us at couchpotatoesunite@gmail.com. Find us at couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com. Facebook us, tweet us at CPU Podcast, gram us at Couch Potatoes Unite. We're here to serve your podcast needs, but really, if you want to talk about Will and Grace, I want to talk about it with you. And I'm kind of super disappointed that I wasn't as disappointed. I was also on the 100 panel. I was less disappointed about that shark jumping because I don't like that show as much as I like this one. This one's really funny. So if you want to talk about it, contact us. I'd be happy to revive a panel. We just need 2 of you out there, so make sure you find us. Finally, Emily, will you ever recover from this trauma?
I don't know, man,
I knew you were going to do that.
Been dragged along for so long, and you just, yes, I think I will.
All right.
I think I'll be just fine.
Okay, good. So finally, at the last, Jeremy, you've jumped the shark. Will you ever recover from this trauma?
Oh, I don't know. Supernatural's on now, so I guess I can lick my wounds with some Dean and Sam.
Is that positive or negative?
That's positive. Like I can. It's like going to eat ice cream after you had like a bad meal. You're like, oh, let me give some ice cream. That makes everything better.
Okay. So Supernatural's ice cream to a bad supper of Will and Grace.
Yeah, or having my tonsils removed. That's a better analogy. It wasn't that painful, though. Not that painful.
So we're sticking with the bad food analogy?
Sure, let's go that way.
Okay. You wouldn't be you without your analogies. As you can see, all but one panelist, me, have jumped the shark on this show and have concluded that they're no longer interested in watching. This means that in order for CPU to cover the show, at least 2 interested panelists would need to volunteer. Do you want to check in with our friends in Apartment 9C at 155 Riverside Drive, New York City? Well, send us a message, why don't you? How? Well, here come the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros. And if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe at our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, all available seasons of Will and Grace are available to stream at NBC's website, though the original run is available on Hulu as well. And frankly, NBC's website may not have season 9 anymore. They tend to favor their current seasons of current shows. In the meantime, our Will and Grace panel, with this Shark Jumpers Anonymous feature, has ended. CPU will not return to cover the show around the water cooler unless you, listener, are interested in becoming a panelist yourself. If you are, and if you have a couple of friends who want to join you, contact us via social media or our email. For now, and in the meantime, and until next time, until next episode, new episodes published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned! Bye-bye!